Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep into NPS today, the Net Promoter Score. You hear it everywhere, but what's the real deal with this score? What can it tell us, and what are its limitations? We're going to unpack all of that today and hopefully uncover some surprises along the way.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much emphasis is put on that one single number, and often without really understanding what it can and can't do.
Yeah, for sure. And for those who might be a little fuzzy on what exactly NPS is,
Yeah.
can you give us a quick rundown?
Of course. So basically, NPS, it's a one-question survey asking customers how likely they are to recommend a specific product or service,
Right.
and it uses a scale of 0 to 10 to get that answer.
Right. And based on their score, they're then categorized into promoters, passives, and detractors.
Exactly. And to get that final NPS score, you subtract the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters.
Okay, so that gives you a snapshot of overall customer sentiment.
It does. It's a good way to track trends over time. But one of the biggest things to remember about NPS is it's not a direct measure of customer satisfaction. It's really important to distinguish between the two.
It's not like a guaranteed predictor of future behavior either, right?
You got it. Just because someone says they're likely to recommend something doesn't necessarily mean they'll actually do it or that their friends will buy it. It's not a foolproof system by any means.
Right. It's not like a magic crystal ball or anything.
No, not at all.
I think this is a good point to bring in some of the insights from our research for this deep dive. Because one of the things that really stood out was this idea that a high NPS doesn't automatically equal success.
Yeah, that's a really important point. A high score can definitely feel good, but it doesn't guarantee customer loyalty or predict whether those recommendations will actually turn into sales.
It's kind of like saying a movie is good just because it makes a ton of money at the box
Yeah.
office.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. You might be missing out on important nuances of the story, the acting, the overall experience. You need to look beyond just the box office numbers, just like you need to look beyond just the NPS number.
I'm thinking about some of the examples from our research. Imagine a fashion brand with a sky-high NPS. People love the image, the style, but then the clothes fall apart after a couple washes.
Exactly. They might recommend it based on looks alone, but not on quality. You're not getting the full picture with just that score.
So it seems like it's really about understanding the why behind the score, not just obsessing over the number itself. And this brings me to another interesting point. We talk a lot about detractors, right? Those giving low scores. But what about the passives? Those who give a 7 or an 8. Are we missing something by not paying more attention to them?
Absolutely. Companies often get so focused on addressing negative feedback that they completely overlook the passives. But the thing is, these passives, they're the ones who are most likely to just quietly slip away.
It's like they're browsing other options while still sort of liking what they have.
Precisely. They might not be actively complaining, but they're also not fully engaged or enthusiastic. And if a better offer comes along, they're out of there.
I see. It's that silent churn that can really sneak up on you.
Exactly. And we found a great example of this with a meal kit company in our research. They had a decent NPS, but their turn rate was through the roof. Turns out it was the passives, the folks who thought the service was fine, but not amazing, who were canceling their subscriptions. They weren't unhappy enough to leave a bad review. They just found something that better suited their needs.
Interesting. So focusing solely on those really low scores can create a real blind spot. Now, you touched on something earlier that I want to come back to, the whole issue of cultural bias in NPS scores.
Right. So different cultures have different norms around giving feedback. What's considered a great score in one culture might be just average in another. If you're a global company and you're comparing scores across different regions, it's super important to take those cultural nuances into account.
Otherwise, you're comparing apples to oranges.
Exactly. A 7 out of 10 from a group that tends to be more reserved in their praise could actually be a much stronger signal of satisfaction than a 9 from a group that's generally more effusive.
Yeah.
You really have to understand the context.
So relying solely on that NPS number without understanding the cultural factors at play can be really misleading.
It can. And even within a single culture, a customer's willingness to recommend something can be influenced by all sorts of factors that a single number just can't capture. Maybe someone gives a high score because the price is right, even if they have issues with the product itself.
Right. It's so much more complex than just a single data point, which I think brings us to another really important distinction, that our research highlighted the difference between customer satisfaction and actual loyalty.
Yes, that's a big one. Satisfaction is like a fleeting feeling. It's about how you feel in the moment. But loyalty is about repeat business, about choosing a specific company over and over again, even when there are other options available.
So someone could be satisfied with a single purchase but never come back for more.
Right. And on the flip side, someone could be a loyal customer, even if they've had a few less than perfect experiences along the way.
Because they trust the brand overall.
Exactly. And NPS doesn't always tell you which one you're dealing with. A company could be celebrating a high NPS score while silently losing customers left and right.
That's a scary thought. So for those out there who might still be viewing NPS as the ultimate measure of customer success, what would you say to them?
I'd encourage them to broaden their horizons a bit and explore other metrics that can give them a more well-rounded view of the customer experience. There's a whole world of alternative approaches out there that can provide much richer and more actionable insights.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and dive into some of those alternative metrics.
It's exciting to realize we're not limited to just NPS when it comes to understanding our customers. There are other metrics out there that can give us so much more information.
I'm ready to hear about them. Our research pointed to some really interesting alternatives, like the Fitness for Purpose score, or F4P for short. That one really seemed to address some of the issues we've been talking about with NPS.
Yeah, F4P really shifts the focus.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about asking, would you recommend this? It's more about, does this actually solve your problem? Does it work? It's about making sure that product or service is really lining up with what the customer wants and needs.
Okay, so instead of measuring how popular something is, we're looking at how effective it is. How does F4P actually do that?
Well, it breaks it down into 3 key areas.
Oh.
It looks at problem solving first. So does the product really address the customer's needs? Then there's performance delivery. Does it actually live up to its promises and work the way it's supposed to? And lastly, it considers the overall experience. Is it easy to use? Is it enjoyable? You want it to be as frictionless as possible.
Gotcha. So it's not just about whether customers like it. It's about whether it actually delivers on its core purpose.
Yeah.
Without being a pain to use.
Exactly. Think about a project management software. A high NPS might tell you people generally like the look and feel and the features, but F4P would dig deeper. Does it actually help teams work together better? Does it streamline their workflow? Does it reduce errors? Is it intuitive and easy to use? F4P wants those answers.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a much more targeted approach.
Yeah.
What about the customer satisfaction score, or CSAT? That one's been around forever. Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, CSAT is all about getting that real-time feedback. After specific interactions, instead of that broad, would you recommend it question, it's more like, how satisfied were you with this particular experience?
So it's much more specific. You can measure satisfaction with a certain purchase or a customer service call or even just a new feature on a website.
Exactly. Let's say you're running an online store. You could use CSAT to see how satisfied people are with the checkout process or the delivery speed or how helpful the customer service team was. It gives you those immediate insights into what's working and what needs work.
Okay, so that's CSAT. Now, the one that I was really intrigued by was the trust score. This is the one developed by TrustGenie. And it seems like this goes beyond just satisfaction. It's like you're getting into the territory of building real relationships with customers.
The trust score is really interesting because it recognizes how important trust is for loyalty. It goes beyond asking, do you like our product? It's more like, do you believe in our company? Do you trust us?
I love that. So how do they define trust? Like, how do they measure it?
They look at 3 main things: competence, reliability, and empathy. Competence means showing you know what you're doing and you can deliver on what you promise. Reliability is all about being consistent, being dependable, showing up when you say you will, and following through. And then empathy, that's about understanding and caring about your customers' needs and experiences.
Yeah, those are some powerful concepts. And I can definitely see how they would be so valuable when you're trying to build those long-term customer relationships.
Absolutely. You could have the best product on the market, but if people don't trust your company, they're not going to stick around. The trust score is all about helping companies see where they can improve and build that trust.
This has been so insightful. We've talked about the problems with NPS, and we've explored some really compelling alternatives. So now, how do we put all of this into action? What are some of the takeaways from our research?
Well, the first step is to diversify your metrics. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't just rely on NPS. Use CSAT, F4P, the trust score. Get a more holistic view of what's going on.
It's like having a whole map instead of just a compass. You get a much better sense of the terrain.
Exactly. And just as important, you've got to segment your customer base. Different customers have different needs and expectations, and you can't treat them all the same.
Right. A one-size-fits-all approach is not going to cut it when it comes to feedback.
Nope. For example, a luxury brand is going to prioritize feedback on exclusivity and personalized service, while a budget airline is going to be more focused on efficiency and affordability. You got to tailor your approach.
It's all about getting to know your customers on a deeper level. What other advice did our research have about creating a more customer-centric culture?
One of the biggest things is to actually do something with the feedback you get. Don't just collect it and then let it sit there. You got to close the loop.
Oh, I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
You give feedback and then it just disappears into the void.
It's a common problem, but it's such a missed opportunity. Let's say you've got a software company and customers are telling you a certain feature is confusing or buggy. If you ignore that, you're going to lose those customers. But if you address it head on, it shows people that you're listening and you care.
So it's about turning that feedback into action instead of just letting it gather dust.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. It's not enough to just measure what people say they'll do. You got to track what they actually do.
Right. It's like we were saying earlier about the difference between satisfaction and loyalty. NPS might tell you how likely someone is to recommend you, but are they actually doing it? Are they coming back for more? Are they actually engaged?
Those are the real signs of success. Look at things like repeat purchases, how often people are using your product or service, and of course, actual referrals.
So it's about going beyond those stated intentions and really observing what customers are doing in the real world.
Exactly. By looking at those actual behaviors, you get a much more accurate picture of customer loyalty than any single metric could ever give you.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like we've really challenged the idea that NPS is the be-all and end-all of customer success. And we've explored so many other ways to think about it.
It's been a great discussion. As we wrap up this part, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. If NPS were to suddenly vanish tomorrow, what would be the one metric you would use to gauge customer success, and why?
Ooh, that's a great question to ponder. We'll be back in just a bit to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that question's been bouncing around in your head a bit. If NPS were to just disappear, poof, what would you use to measure customer success?
Yeah.
It really gets you thinking about what's important, doesn't it?
It does. It really pushes us to look beyond just, simple numbers on a page and really think about what goes into building those strong customer relationships, the kind that last.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in, the metrics and the data. But I think what we've really seen in this deep dive is that NPS is really just one small part of a much bigger picture.
I completely agree. And focusing too much on that single NPS score can sometimes even be harmful. It can give you tunnel vision, make you miss the bigger picture, like building trust and providing real value.
It's about creating those experiences, those moments that make customers want to keep coming back. Not because they feel like they have to, but because they genuinely enjoy doing business with you.
Exactly. It's about making that customer-centric mindset a core part of your business. Like it's woven into everything you do, the product, the service, marketing, everything.
It's about those relationships you build, earning trust, and going above and beyond what's expected.
And knowing that customer success isn't a destination, it's like a journey. You're always learning, always adapting, always trying to improve.
So as we wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive, I want to leave you all with this thought. Don't let NPS be your only guide. There's a whole world of metrics and insights out there. So explore them all, and remember, a truly successful business puts the customer at the center of everything.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into NPS and beyond. We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration.